In this episode, I want to share some systemic insights about onboarding successors. In an earlier podcast episode, we talked about the vicious cycle in succession planning and transition situations. And I mentioned three key initiatives you can take to break this cycle. After we covered already the approach of creating systemic scenarios, today, I want to touch upon the topic of a systemic approach for onboarding successors. So, imagine you are in a succession situation, whether you are the owner, the successor, or part of the extended team and the organization. Everybody is looking at this situation very carefully and often with attention and stress. And especially the successor and the owner are quote unquote on stage. Every move is watched very carefully, and the perception and the awareness is often at the highest level, not only by the members in the organization, but also by the members in the extended field, for example, outside partners, suppliers, or even investment partners. So, what can you do? Well, first of all, and this sounds really obvious, there should be an onboarding process. And you should not just throw the keys over the fence, so to speak, but make sure that you have agreed an onboarding process, ideally develop that together to facilitate the process of starting in this organization, in this new role, and finding a good place from where the successor can act. Secondly, onboarding does not start when the agreement is made, the contract is signed, or on the day when the successor is starting in her or his new role. It should start way earlier, in a much earlier phase, and ideally when you are considering or evaluating potential successors or candidates. And number three, the key mistake that I often see when the clients are coming to me for consultations is that from a systemic perspective, the successor does not find her or his place. So, in some cases, even disregarding or disrespecting the inherent orders in an organization or in a family business, for example. So, what are examples of these inherent orders that we often find? Very simple. Simply said, uh, for example, those who came first have a higher rank from a systemic perspective. Okay, not from an organizational or org chart perspective, but from a systemic perspective. And those who are making an important contribution also have a higher rank from also from a systemic perspective in the organization. And contribution not does not necessarily have to be a financial contribution. It can be other forms, for example, in terms of innovation, safeguarding customer relationships, or keeping an important part of the organization together, for example. Also, those who provided funding for the organization in an earlier stage, for example, when the company was founded, those often have a somewhat different rank than those who came in later, for example, with a contribution. A good example here for this would be growth funding later on. So the earlier funding, the earlier money is serving the organization in a different way than the later funding that is being contributed. Now, how can an onboarding process be supported with systemic practices? Here are just a few practical tips for you to get started as a successor. First one would be to acknowledge that you came in last into the organization. So, from a systemic perspective, your place is the last in the rank order. Then try to find out who has been for the longest time in the organization and seek the dialogue with those members in the organization. And when you meet with those team members, ask them a simple question: what is important here? And this opens up not only the relationship, but the engagement with those who have been there and who are perceived to also have a higher rank, not only by themselves, but by everybody in the organization. I know this may be hard to understand or to comprehend when you are in the situation. In fact, it may be a humbling experience because now you are there, you have maybe bought the company, you have taken over, you feel energized and in charge, you want to change a lot of things, and yet you need to find your path and your place in this systemic fabric of the organization or the family business. So I would encourage you to start from there, and you will gain more power and more energy and acceptance faster. Good luck and follow for more.